Let me introduce Jarosław Duraj, who is a Polish Jesuit living and working for years in Macau, China. He's teaching theology and interreligious dialogue at University of St. Joseph in Macau. His particular interest is focused in this dialogue between Christianity and Buddhism. The title of his paper today is the following: Universal Brotherhood and Interreligious Dialogue, the case study of Father Yves Raguin and Master Shengyan.
So my heartfelt greetings to everybody present on site in Bobolanum, my beloved Bobolanum, alma mater, and online as well. So I am joining you from the Far East, as Michał introduced me, from Macau, and I would like to share with you something that is maybe outside of the mainstream of presentations today. So I will focus more on Christian-Buddhist dialogue. The structure of my presentation is as follows. I will briefly introduce the Christian-Buddhist dialogue in China. Then I will move from the relationship between spiritual transformation to social engagement. And finally, what would be the role of religions in the context of the service of universal humanity and fraternity. So I would like to start from the historical background a little bit, because Buddhism is very important religion in terms of beginnings of the religious tolerance. Buddhism, as probably all of you know, is one of the oldest traditions, wisdom traditions in the history of humankind. And actually, it dates back to 5th century BC. So already from the very beginning, the idea of religious tolerance, respect of others, other people's beliefs, was internal part of the doctrine, the teaching of the Buddha. But the very important person in the history of Buddhism was Emperor Ashoka. Already in the 3rd century BC, he converted to Buddhism and issued several edicts of religious toleration. This had a powerful influence on the history of Buddhism in India, but also in Southeast Asia. So one of these edicts, it beautifully describes this kind of tolerance. It is the edict about religious tolerance. And let us focus on this brief passage here. One should not honor only one's own religion and condemn the religions of others, but one should honor others' religions for this or that reason. So doing, one helps one's own religion to grow and render service to the religions of others too. In acting otherwise, one digs the grave of one's own religion and also does harm to other religions. So this is a very important historical document which proves that the idea of what we today, especially in the context of this conference and the document of Abu Dhabi, we call it Universal Fraternity, was something at least in the initial stage present in Buddhism. And this idea, of course, accompanies many Buddhists across the centuries. It does not mean that there were no religious conflicts also from the side of Buddhists, because there are some countries in Southeast Asia where the Buddhists are also engaged in military conflicts like Burma or Sri Lanka. However, in general terms, this idea of religious tolerance is there. So I'm speaking more specifically now about the Chinese context. Christian-Buddhist dialogue in China it also has a quite long history, although basically the intensification of the relationship between Christian and Buddhist took place in the 20th century. with the initiative, thanks to the initiative of many monks, Christian missionaries, but also some Buddhist monks who realized that Buddhism cannot remain isolated in the monastery, but in order to face the problems and challenges of the reality and the society, of modern society, they need to enter into dialogue with especially Christianity. I'm talking specifically about two people today, two great representatives from the side of Christianity and Buddhism. Yves Raguin, he was a French Jesuit, and Master Shengyan, he was a Chinese monk. Both of them passed away already, and both of them actually were in China first. Master Shengyan was born in China. Yves Raguin was sent as a French Jesuit to Shanghai, and he worked at famous Aurora University, which was built by French Jesuits. It was a long-standing tradition of French Jesuits working there. Unfortunately, in 1953, he was expelled from China because the power was taken. When the communists came to power, they expelled all foreign missionaries. So many of them found their place in Taiwan, in the Philippines, in other places as well, but especially in Taiwan. So after the war, many missionaries established the missions in Taiwan, but also many Buddhist monks from mainland China who could not stand, who could not accept the political situation in China, they escaped from the continent and went to Taiwan. Hence, we have a lot of communities, Christian and Buddhist, communities, temples, monasteries, universities, schools, founded by either Protestant or Catholic missionaries, Catholic Church, or Buddhist monks. With regard to Buddhist monks, we have four great monasteries, which have a tremendous impact on the education, on the situation in Taiwan. Now, this is just a simple example of the encounter, of the interreligious dialogue, of the relationship between Buddhist monks and Christian Catholic bishops. This picture represents a famous Buddhist monk from the southern part of Taiwan, Kaohsiung, and in the center is Cardinal Paul Shan in presence of John Paul II in the Vatican. So he was very instrumental in bringing, actually, Cardinal Paul Shan, bringing many monks to Vatican to meet many representatives of the Catholic Church. Now, so these are two personalities I'm going to speak briefly about. I cannot go too deeply due to the limitation of time, but I will just give you some general background about those important figures so that you may have a picture of what is happening in Taiwan, thanks to them. As I said, both of them already passed away, but their legacy, their contribution remains because they have quite a good number of followers and disciples. So, first, let us start from Father Yves Raguin and his contribution into interreligious dialogue. I will not speak too much about his background, only that he was born in 1912 and passed away in 1998 in Taiwan, in Taipei. He was famous sinologist, theologian, Buddhologist, priest, of course, and missionary, and very recognized spiritual master and leader as well. He published quite a lot of books in French, in English, some of them in Chinese, some of them were translated also into Polish. So I think the audience is maybe familiar with some of his books, like, for example, Paths to Contemplation or The Death of God. He spent most of his time in China, in Taiwan, and in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam. But after returning from Vietnam, he remained until his death in Taiwan. So what is his main objective in terms of dialogue? His interest, first of all, is to dialogue with what we call Chinese wisdom traditions, Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. But his particular interest is about Buddhism, because he discovered that Buddhists help him to recover certain experiences of Christianity, or go deeper into certain aspects of Christianity or Christian spirituality. He appreciated very much the practice of Buddhist meditation, but also Taoist and Confucian spirituality and philosophy. In order to illustrate his method, his experience actually, I would like to show you a passage where he speaks about this experience of dialogue, which I find as some kind of hermeneutical circle, which helped him to understand deeper himself and his tradition. So he says, I decided to make East and West meet, but not in a syncretic manner. Christ would be the center and way from start to finish. The whole course began to appear to me as a highway leading to God. The central experience would be Christian, but as I moved ahead, I would meet Buddhists, Taoists, Yogists, and many others. Christ would help me understand them, while their experience would help me deepen my understanding of Christ. To my amazement, this is what actually happened. This, I think, in a nutshell, it describes his experience of encounter with other religions. Not that he somehow, after that, started to promote Buddhism or other religions. He simply wanted to recognize that this encounter helped him to understand deeper his own tradition, and he believed that it was Christ's presence in this process. So what would be the method of dialogue or elements of dialogue that he focused on or promoted? First of all, appreciation of the role and impact of Buddhism, especially Zen Buddhism. The second one would be the primary importance of the religious experience. The third one would be the pathway of or way of interiority, or he also calls it inner gate, the inner gate. And then this leads to some kind of re-evaluation of Catholic theology, because he found Catholic theology not very helpful, not very not inculturated enough into the Chinese context in order to respond to the sensibilities of the Chinese people, to Asian people. And then that's why, thanks to this inspiration from Buddhism, he focused more on apophatic and kenotic theology, not so much cataphatic theology, which is more dominant in the Western theology. And then he sets up certain basic conditions for authentic dialogue, such as humility, appreciation, acceptance, knowledge, understanding, and self-reflection. The fruits of dialogue he identifies in a following way. First, the dialogue leads to reconsideration of the mystery of faith. And in this context, it refers specifically to the question of theology of creation. The second fruit would be reappreciation of its own beliefs or its own religious tradition or background. And the third one would be a new theological language, what I mentioned before, that Christianity need to find a new language to express and to convey, to share the Christian message. And finally, the catalytic role of religions. I will speak a little bit about this soon. Now, in the case of Master Shengyan, he lived between 1930 and 2009. I had the privilege and honor to meet him personally. I actually lived in his monastery for around 1 month. So it was a very touching, a very inspiring experience. His objective is to reformulate or renew the role of Buddhism, the mission of Buddhism in today's world. First of all is the revival of Chan Buddhism, and the second one is the promotion of humanistic Buddhism. The objective of Buddhism, he says, is to promote the spiritual development of humanity and to resolve human suffering. Buddhism, he says, is primarily not meant to satisfy the human search for pure knowledge. And in terms of interfaith relationship and interreligious dialogue, in which he was very intensively present and committed, he says that peaceful coexistence with and respect for other religions has always been the Buddhist approach toward the promotion of a peaceful, stable, and harmonious society. So this is the example of his participations in various meetings. He was really very active. For example, this is the meeting in Bangkok in the year 2002 with the representatives of various religions. This is another example of encounter with Cardinal Paul Shan. I showed you before the picture with him. This is another meeting with Jerry Martinson here in the center, one Jesuit, and in the group of other practitioners. So these were the examples of the basic introduction to those two personalities. And now I would like to show the relationship between spiritual transformation and social engagement. Father Yves Raguin, he promoted this path, the way of interiority, because he believed that this is the most successful, the most fundamental way leading to authentic and fruitful dialogue. He says that last few centuries, the Occidental spirituality took the direction of exteriority, pretending to remain spiritual. Orient kept alive this interiorizing tradition that is preserved in Zen. That's why he really thought that Zen practice of meditation can be very helpful for this spiritual renewal. He says that in Zen, encounter with Buddhist Zen is one of the most remarkable fruits of the encounter between Christianity and Buddhism is exactly this rediscovery or deepening of this path of interiority. He himself had several interesting experiences. For example, in Japan, Father Raguin went to Japan intentionally to get the confirmation of his spiritual experience in Kamakura. This is the example this is the place, Kamakura, south to Tokyo, a beautiful Buddhist site. And he had a wonderful dialogue with Yamada Kounse Shin, in 1975. And that year he got several inspirations and realizations. He understood that he needs to enter into some kind of spiritual synthesis, mainly integration of spiritual paths of China and the Occident. It means he wanted to use the example of Buddhism as an inspiration for him how to feed the soul and to make in the soul the synthesis of two worlds, which would allow to become the intermediary between the East and the West, and especially between Christ and the souls. With regard to Master Shengyan, he also promoted Buddhist meditation, but in relation to social transformation. The idea he promoted was to build the Pure Land on earth, to promote Buddhist ethics of social responsibility, and also to establish global ethics. He built for that purpose the institution called Dharma Drum Mountain, Fagushan, which is the cultural and educational institution. This is the logo of Fagushan, Dharma Drum Mountain. And this is the general, a bit blurred picture, but this gives you an overview of the whole complex that he built. And it includes Dharma Drum Buddhist College, Sangha Seminary, Retreat Center, Main Buddha Hall, Dharma Drum Museum, and many other things. So, what is the goal of this Dharma Drum Mountain? Is the protection of the spiritual environment. He calls it spiritual environment, and it has a common ethos. First of all, it has a vision to uplift the character of humanity and build a pure land on earth. The second, the spirit of it, is to give of ourselves for the benefit of all. The third one, direction, is to return to the original intention of the Buddha and work for the purification of the world. And the fourth one, the approach is to promote comprehensive education and extend loving care to all. So finally, my final section of this presentation is the relationship between religions and at the service of universal humanity and fraternity. So Father Yves Raguin, he considered religions as catalysts. And I would like to show you a brief passage to this, describing this intuition. A catalyst is an element that triggers a transformation in something else. He calls it a catalyst because he believes that a real catalyst will be the one who enables others to grow and develop. The perfect catalyst helps and inspires others to discover and develop within their own culture. He is an inspirer, someone who awakens, whose mere presence and existence is a call, not to imitation, but to full personal development. He has no desire to make disciples, but only to show people they are loved and help them attain the full level of their capacities. And final passage is, the catalyst is there to inspire others in their search for God. So this would be his understanding, the importance of the religion in today's society. And now we can identify three dimensions in his approach. I call it new horizons. The first one is planetary humanism, that he wants to promote, universal spirituality, the second element, and finally cosmic theology. All these elements are somehow a vision that he understood as necessary for Christianity to be in dialogue with all other religions. With regard to Master Shengyan, also he stressed the importance of the relevance of humanistic Buddhism for society. He says the following: Buddhism in the 21st century must root itself in concern for social problems. If Buddhists only shut themselves away in the cloister, Buddhism will be eliminated by contemporary society and eventually meet extinction. But Buddhist care for society should be aimed at helping everyone reduce suffering, increase happiness, and uplift their character. It surely does not mean drifting with the tide and becoming assimilated by worldly ways. So he proposes a Buddhist education in the society. Buddhist education consists of several aspects. First of all, it is education through academics. The second aspect is education through public outreach. And the third aspect is education through caring services. And also he promotes Buddhist environmentalism. It means environmentalism that protects the spiritual environment, protecting the natural environment, protecting the living environment, and protecting the social environment. So we can see how socially, universally involved, all-embracing his approach is. And finally, he also addresses the role of religious leaders in 21st century. As I said, he was very committed to various interreligious meetings, and this is the example of his participation in United Nations in 2000, where he gave this speech about mission of religious leaders in 21st century. Very, very important, very inspiring personality. So for the conclusion, Father Yves Raguin, in his approach, we can find three dimensions which complement each other. The first one is contemplation, the second one is mission, and the third one is dialogue. All of them are, in a sense, intrinsically necessary for the overview approach to dialogue and for what we would call the promotion of universal fraternity. And finally, with regard to Shengyan, he was, of course, Buddhist reformer. He wanted to revitalize Chinese Buddhism by adapting it to modern society and the West. So with this brief presentation, I think I gave you some hints, some basic ideas about the contribution of these two great personalities to the promotion of universal fraternity through interreligious dialogue. Thank you very much.